With all the buzz going around about NASCAR going international again, I thought it would be appropriate to go back to the last time the Cup Series went overseas. For a 3-year stretch in the 1990s and on the verge of mainstream explosion, the sport ventured out into uncharted territory in Japan and brought the southeastern-based product in front of a whole new audience. The beginning was full of hype and the ending was abrupt, but the substance in between is what we're going to focus on here. Believe it or not, NASCAR actually pulled this off and managed to trek dozens of cars, teams, and equipment halfway across the planet on 3 occasions and put on a showcase in the hopes it would stick the landing on broadening the spectrum. But did they really accomplish that? Let's find out. When it was announced that the NASCAR Winston Cup Series would hold an exhibition race at the end of the 1996 season at the Suzuka circuit, there was an outpouring of skepticism. How would the logistics of this work? Would this actually move the needle and bring in fans from a different continent? With the NASCAR image rapidly escalating and entering its boom period, they wanted to capitalize in every way possible. This seemed like a big jump, and by the body language and tone of some drivers' voices, they had their doubts and didn't seem like they had much business being there. It wasn't even a full field of cars, and several entries were local Japanese racers to give the fans a dose of familiarity, mixed in with some of the biggest superstars that NASCAR had to offer. But the mixture of cultures on the racetrack couldn't be more different. The fact that this was an exhibition race really set the tone for what was expected. No Cup Series driver had ever touched this course, so there was going to be some give and take and a certain etiquette not to cause any funny business out there. This was strictly for the fans and was part of Bill France Jr.'s vision to globalize the sport. It all started with the general manager of the Speedway, Hiroshima Suzuki, walking into his office in 1994 to the looks of confusion from everyone. But Suzuki had an attraction to the sport from afar and was interested in collaboration. They struck the deal in November of '95 and the rest was history. Suzuka was widely respected by all forms of motorsports and was hosting more and more events as time went on. The natives viewed it as a sacred facility and it had to be made known to as many in the industry as a must-see track to compete at. So with only 27 cars set to take the green, it definitely didn't have the feel of a regular season NASCAR race. But then the cast of personalities that did show up more than made up for it. Who was there? The series' young stud prodigy and most marketed driver globally, Jeff Gordon, was. The Intimidator was there. Seasoned veteran with a championship to his name, Rusty Wallace. That year's Daytona 500 champ, Dale Jarrett. The freshly donned Winston Cup champion, Terry Labonte. Other well-known fixtures in the series, Sterling Marlin, Ernie Irvan, and Michael Waltrip. And then you had the more exotic entries, such as Trans Am champion Wally Dallenbach, longtime journeyman success Herschel McGriff, developing driver graduating from the Truck Series Mike Skinner, and the centerpiece of the handful of local Japanese drivers, Formula 500 and Rolex 24 champ Hideo Fukuyama. He was instantly on board with participating as soon as he heard this event was being held. The course meant a lot to him, and he wasn't about to miss out on this opportunity. He took the place of Jimmy Spencer's ride for Travis Carter's team and began to gain knowledge during practice and see what these machines were all about. To spice things up and give this race an added intrigue, NASCAR gave it a gimmicky format much like the All-Star race. It was an exhibition, and you wanted to avoid long, drawn-out green flag runs, so why not? It was a 100-lap feature split into 2 50-lap segments, a 15-minute break in between, and the top 10 would be inverted to start segment 2. The track itself was 8 turns, 1.4 miles, and the front straightaway ran long enough to reach speeds of 170 miles an hour. It was essentially shaped like a narrow oval track with a squiggly line as the backstretch to dumb things down, but of course it was more difficult and technical than that. And to add different altitudes at different points of the course made it even more tricky. So we've covered everything now but the actual race itself. How'd that go? Well, it was an adventure. There was really not much to write home about in the first 50 laps. Rusty Wallace controlled almost the entire segment until his brakes got hot and he wisely ventured back through the field to get in a better position for the inversion. A lot of the underfunded rides were breaking down right at the start of the race, cars were running off into the sand traps constantly due to lack of experience on the course, and a litany of transmission problems broke out. The teams didn't bring their pit boxes, so crew members were having to sit back in the garage stalls and watch the action unfold on the monitors provided to them. During the short intermission, Rusty's crew cooled his brakes off and got him in position to take back control of the race. He would restart third after the strategy to descend through the pack paid off. He made quick work of the 2 sitting ducks in front of him and began to set sail. Fukuyama's day ended early after being taken out by Wally Dallenbach, much to the chagrin of owner Travis Carter. But the driver would be in much higher spirits afterwards. It set up a restart with 6 to go, and all you had to work with was Dale Earnhardt holding up Jeff Gordon and the entire field, allowing Rusty to run off and hide. After a car came to a stop in the closing laps, there was a 1-lap shootout to the finish, giving everyone a final shot at the dominant Wallace, but it was the same story. He closed the deal out and claimed the first victory overseas in NASCAR's history. Jeff probably would have had something for him, but he paid the price by winning that first segment and having to come from 10th place. And trying to get by the 3-car on a narrow road course with limited passing zones is about as easy as trying to corral a wild bull with no rodeo experience whatsoever. And as far as all the mechanical trouble, most teams didn't really know what gear ratios to bring with such little knowledge of what this track had to offer. Even the powerful Robert Yates team couldn't grasp it. The race was a learning curve, to put it lightly, and only left more room to grow for next year's running in the same setting with more notes to go off of. Time will tell if the 1997 version would be an improvement, but we would find out soon enough. The second time around, little did anyone know history would be made. They practiced and qualified in the rain, for the first time ever. How'd they do it? Well, with pretty much what you see today. Rain tires, a windshield wiper, and a taillight in the back window. It gave Goodyear and everyone in the industry a sense of relief and confidence that they could pull it off back in the States on road courses alike. But on race day, the rains let up, leaving a lot of teams mystified as to how to set up their cars and what to expect with how the track would behave in green conditions. So what made this year different than the raw debut in '96? For starters, the field was bigger, an increase from 27 to 30 cars. There was no segment break and a total of 125 laps compared to 100 laps the year before, and new drivers. Among the most notable additions, Mark Martin made the trip this time representing Jack Roush and sat on the pole. He'd never been outside North America, never raced in the rain, and topped the charts. I think that says all you need to know about how good of a road racer he was. Another new driver competing was right alongside him. Australian racer and Bathurst 1000 champ Jim Richards. How many of you had that as a front row? If you did, you're a liar. There was also another Truck Series driver, reigning champ Jack Sprague filling in for Terry Labonte, up-and-comer Kenny Irwin Jr., and, oh yeah, Ricky Craven, taking the place of Jeff freaking Gordon, his then teammate. That's right, the newly named two-time series champ and rising face of the sport wasn't even there. Granted, he couldn't race due to a procedure on his throat, but still, what a void left that had to leave NASCAR and the fans feeling awfully disappointed. Anyhow, with the added car count and race length, you got the sense that this movement really had some weight behind it. The stars kept coming back and the fans kept showing up, so why not keep this thing rolling? The fans wouldn't have to wait long for any action, as this race wasted no time busting things wide open. In the very first turn of the first lap, several cars veered off into the gravel trap, combined with a brake check stack-up. Kenny Irwin Jr. was a victim, and his day was instantly ruined. On the ensuing restart, the defending champion of the race, Rusty Wallace's engine let go, while Dale Earnhardt cut a tire and plowed into the wall head first on the same lap, the fourth lap. With two of the biggest names and threats to win out of the picture, this looked like it was Mark's race to lose. But there's a couple things you need to know. If you don't know much about Mark's career, outside of a lot of success and consistency, he had some of the sorriest luck that he honestly didn't even deserve. The racing gods were just mean to Mark, for no apparent reason. More times than not, he got the short end of the stick in gut-wrenching fashion. The other thing, you see, Dale Earnhardt had a reputation. Just because he was out of contention in a race didn't mean he was done letting drivers know he still existed out there. If he wasn't a threat for the win, he became an obstacle. As Mark was cruising along about to put the battered 3-car another lap down, the two for whatever reason collided and sent Earnhardt spinning. Thankfully, Mark didn't receive much damage and kept going, but Dale wasn't done. He spent the next run hounding Mark for a hopeless lap back, only to immediately return to pit road and exit the race for good due to the engine overheating. They didn't call him the Intimidator for nothing, folks. The attrition in this race was alarming. Lap after lap, cars were running off course, breaking parts, and sliding into the gravel trap. You had Wally Dallenbach, who had a feel-good top 5 the year before, get into a crash with Lance Hooper and let him know about his frustration afterward. Plus, among all of this, was the fact the TV broadcast didn't even have live scoring for a majority of this race. Unless Ken Squire and Buddy Baker could count as the cars went by with their own eyes, they had no clue who was running where. And that caution involving Dallenbach would turn out to change the complexion of the whole race. Ricky Craven, Jack Sprague, and a few others pitted off sequence beforehand and assumed control of the front, shuffling Mark back in the pack and losing the race off pit road to the surprising Mike Skinner. He would end up working his way back to the front, with Craven's tires falling off, but would find himself stuck behind the 31, hoping for a bobble where he could pounce. The two battled tooth and nail for several laps, and you figured the more talented driver would prevail. But as the laps wound down, Mark started falling off, big time. His tires completely went away down the stretch, and with fuel in question, I bet he decided to back off the throttle and at least try to bring it to the checkered. Skinner was in save mode as well, but in his first season with RCR, he was able to bring it home and salvage the day in that camp. As for Mark, well, it was a result he was all too familiar with. So to sum things up, the Suzuka races were quite volatile. It was to be expected with so much unfamiliarity by a combination of NASCAR drivers and teams not knowing much about the track and the locals not knowing much about the cars. There was carnage from both ends, but the local Japanese drivers struggled, and who could blame them? Those bulkier stock cars were far from anything they were used to, and they didn't have a lot of prep time. Think of Formula One coming to Watkins Glen, and you had some top-notch NASCAR drivers enter, but it was F1 cars and their rules. How do you think that would go? Plus, with certain angles on TV, the stands looked kinda smattered. The crowds weren't overwhelming. Yeah, NASCAR was there, but not racing in their type of wheelhouse. Suzuka wasn't built for stock cars. That's why you saw so much attrition. But with a new track on the horizon and a fresh set of storylines for 1998, the whole Japan experiment was about to take a much different twist. The Suzuka Road Course was a novelty event, but with the construction of twin-ring Motegi, a 1.5-mile oval, these NASCAR stock cars got placed into their natural habitat. This was truly a showcase of what the sport was all about to a foreign audience, and what the people involved with this experiment envisioned long term. It was built with a resemblance to Darlington, the main inspiration behind its conception, but other than shape, the track was nothing compared to it, other than, it's an oval. As far as banking and width goes, it was its own beast. Each end of the track did have different characteristics with corner entry, but with a new pavement, multi-groove racing was going to be far-fetched. Now another thing to bring to the table, this event had still been missing something the last 2 years. Most of the high-profile drivers had eventually made the trip out there by now. We had seen the best of the best, the who's who, the champions, the significant characters the series had to offer, but there's just one guy left that needed to make the long journey across the pond to complete the list.
We're going to go inside and look around a little bit. Look, even on the sign it says, "Welcome, Darrell Waltrip, to the Honda Museum."
That's right, Jaws himself. It was the end of his career, but Dale Jarrett and Robert Yates Racing gave him the chance to fill in and check this off his racing bucket list. He had done everything under the sun in racing, but this was the cherry on top. Up-and-coming driver Jeremy Mayfield would make his Japan debut with an interesting hair situation and sit on the pole for Roger Penske. Awesome Bill Elliott joined the club of first-timers in the country. Jeff Gordon would return after sitting out last year's event after laying down one of the most dominant seasons the series has ever seen, and Jeff Burton would join the party in his second season with Roush Racing, on the precipice of exploding onto the Cup Series scene and sporting a paint scheme paying tribute to the late Bruce Lee.
He's a teddy bear.
Nah, polar bear.
You're a teddy bear.
Polar
But
bear.
You got a polar bear on your car, but you're a teddy bear.
Polar bears are a lot different than teddy bear.
But the polar bear's
I
on the
think
car, Dale.
the polar bear's got the claws and you go to
But you're a teddy bear in the seat.
There's no doubt that the leading storyline in this race was the 1-2 combo of Dale Earnhardt and Dale Jr., who Big E brought along with him this time in preparation for the slow progression into his Cup Series career. Along with sponsoring the race, Coca-Cola made a dual partnership with the two for a primary sponsorship on both cars. The Black 3 turned red, and Jr. made his first and only appearance in the one car in the Cup Series and had the polar bear on board. With all this going into the race, this event had to be must-watch TV. This would be what catapulted the sport into the other part of the world. This is what NASCAR worked towards, and their investment finally paid off. Or did it? Let's find out. Anytime the first race on a new track is held, there's a lot of skepticism. How's the grip going to be? How many grooves will there be? And how will the tires wear? But for the most part, considering all those factors, it actually wasn't that bad. There were a lot of lead changes, several incidents that forced cautions. Gordon got clipped by a spinning lap car, but fortunately it was just cosmetic damage. No real dominant car took charge in the first half, but you had your contenders sorted out. Live track scoring was out once again, which had to be frustrating for the broadcasters. A huge chunk of their job is telling you where so-and-so is running and how many positions they've gained or lost. I guess the silver lining is at least they were at an oval track this time and could tell a lot easier what the running order was with the field constantly in front of them. And how is this Dale Jr. kid going to hold up? It was his first ever Cup Series action, and under abnormal circumstances no less. Was he going to live up to the lofty expectations set by his genetics alone?
And here he comes, and with him comes Dale Earnhardt Jr. This is a battle for the lead. The kid's going to try to put it on him. He goes into second spot. Earnhardt Jr. Gordon has the edge. This is one of the battles everybody's been waiting for. Earnhardt Jr. goes in a little deeper than Gordon. Stuck it in there, and he held him off. How about that? The Grand National champion facing off with a Winston Cup champion.
Inside again. He's inside to your door.
Junior's car would fade through the middle portion of the race, but we haven't seen the last of him yet. Darrell Waltrip's feel-good story came to a crashing halt, but at this point in his career, he was just having fun, and what happened happened. No bitterness, he just got out and embraced his wife Stevie, gave a classy interview, and a light-humored warning to Bobby Hamilton.
Bobby's on the same flight I am going home, and it's, about a 14-hour ride. He'll be pretty miserable all the way home, I can promise you that.
There were an astounding 19 lead changes between 6 drivers just over halfway through the race, and 3 true contenders came to the forefront. Gordon, the 2-time reigning series champ, Jeff Burton, and the 97 Suzuka winner Mike Skinner. As the laps wound down, Burton was chasing down Skinner in a hurry, and it looked like a foregone conclusion he was going to make the pass and cruise away. The concern on crew chief Larry McReynolds' face said it all, but when a fiery crash broke out between Brendan Gaughan and Bobby Hamilton, it changed everything about how the finish would go down. Since cleanup from the wreck was lengthy, an extensive caution period shrunk the amount of time anyone would have left to make a winning pass on the 31 car. On the final restart, turns out it would be the other Jeff challenging for the win. Gordon, that is. He spent the whole 1998 season scorching the field and building a villain-type persona with how often he was racking up the hardware. He had one final chance to dunk on everyone and even do it on the other side of the world, but he couldn't make it happen, and Skinner held on to win back-to-back Japan races. And you want to know just how sick of Gordon winning everyone was? Just let Mike himself tell you as he crossed the line for the checkered flag. Yeah, it was that ridiculous. It's so odd because Mike Skinner would never go on to win a regular season points race in the Cup Series in his entire career. Sure, he got close, but there was a lot of heartbreak and bruises, and it eventually led to him out of a contending ride. He eventually reverted back to the Craftsman Truck Series, where he made a name for himself and ended up rekindling that success. But for at least 2 moments at the end of the season, he got a chance to celebrate something. A consolation, if you will. Motorsports aren't out there to please everyone, as is the case in life. But wait a minute, what about how Dale Jr.'s race ended up? Well, during that last caution for that violent crash, with his car not up to winning speed and having nothing to lose, he came in for one final pit stop to take on 4 tires and salvage the best finish he could. Why not? But the thing is, those tires weren't his. The team had to borrow some. On the restart, he immediately flew past the back half of the top 10, including his dad, and wound up getting the best of him for 6th place, with Earnhardt Sr. finishing 8th. As competitive as Dale was, he was already annoyed enough as it was that he got beat by his own son. But to make matters worse, he got beat by his own tires. That's right, the team Dale Jr. borrowed that last set of tires from was from the 3 team itself, unbeknown to the man in black. But he found out, and he would express his displeasure in a rather unconventional way. After the race, the media caught up with Jr. for an interview. It looked innocent and routine through the TV screen, but little did the audience watching know he had just gotten a shoe thrown his way at a high rate of speed in the trailer, and I don't have to tell y'all who it came from. So then what? Most of you know by now that this was a 3-year experiment, and we just went through those 3 years. That was the length of the contract between NASCAR and Japan to showcase these races, and it was extended no further. So what happened? Why wasn't it stalled out any further? Well, there's a number of factors. The biggest being too high of costs and labor to keep shuttling mass equipment overseas for a race that honestly left a lot to be desired. Think of putting yourselves in the position of the casual Japanese race fan, and would this appeal to you? I kind of compare it to the F1 boom that recently skyrocketed that series on American soil. Yeah, it was spectacular, it was real, it was a rapid ascent, but has it lasted? From what I can tell, it's already starting to lose some of its luster. At the end of the day, racing is racing, and you either like it or you don't. It's not sexy or glamorous like football and basketball, where people are just naturally attracted to it. Those races had to be spectacular, have some memorable moments, something to catch the eye of those fans. But they were just races. There were crashes, lead changes, a few tense moments, but nothing that really moved the needle. And that's what it was going to take to really broaden the spectrum for NASCAR. The two cultures just clashed too drastically. The premise behind it had some merit. You want as many people to see this show as possible, but this was a little more of a bite than NASCAR could chew at the time. It still hadn't gotten close to the peak it would experience in the mid-2000s. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe it was never going to work long term anyway, but at least it was attempted. But just think about those drivers and teams that saw almost instant exits from those races, whether they got into an incident or had a mechanical failure. Think about how disheartening that had to be, trekking approximately 7,000 miles across the planet to run less than 10 laps, and you could hear it and see it in their body language and voices. They had to feel like it was a complete waste of time and hard work. Sure, you got a trip to Japan for a few days, but these drivers didn't necessarily adapt well to that scene. Bottom line, they're racers and just wanted to compete, and it was taken away from them in a short time, largely out of their control. Plus, if you notice in the broadcast, the stands just weren't that full. They were very average crowds at best, and even the brand spanking new facility at Motegi didn't even draw a packed house. And speaking of Motegi, that place didn't exactly have a happy ending. You'd think as state of the art and modernized as that place was, it would at least thrive in some capacity and go on to host many lucrative events and etch its place in motorsports relevance. But that didn't happen. First off, the sightlines for the road course that went through tunnels and looped around and intertwined through the infield were poor. There were obstructions and fans didn't have the best views of what was going on during those races. But that was just the beginning of its problems. As far as entry and exit points into the track, there was just a 2-lane public road. That's not ideal. There were very little accommodations for fans and media personnel close by, as in just a single hotel. There was no major highway or interstate built to properly funnel traffic through the area, and a few MotoGP drivers even complained about a nuclear power plant being too close to the track, threatening their health. Even though the World Health Organization and NSA said it was in a perfectly fine radius away from the facility to safely hold events. It last held an event in 2010 for the IndyCar Series, and as of March 2022 was renamed the Mobility Resort Motegi, largely a motorsports facility for Honda that hosts bike races for MotoGP. And that's the tale of the last time NASCAR went overseas. Maybe it's in their future again one day, but for now the focus seems to be more within the continent, as the Montreal road course Circuit Gilles Villeneuve is being eyed by most in the industry as the next venture. It's hosted the now Xfinity Series in years past, but may see a reclamation in the form of cup racing. We'll see what happens down the road. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and be sure to like and subscribe like your life depends on it. Until next time, this has been a Platinum Paradise video.
Okay, so I'm with Mr. Dale Earnhardt. I believe this guy likes Japan a lot, right? So can you eat sushi several times?
Yeah, sure. Love it. That's why I came back.
How about sake?
No, I'm easy on the sake. I got to drive today.
Okay, so then.
Holy cow. Man, I like this thing. Look at this. Got a rear view mirror. Man, you need a spotter on this thing. And oh, wait a minute. Wonder if I could get this through customs. I don't know. I need a motor for my boat, but God, boy, this is what look at this. Oh, wow. Got shifter, got mirror. Clear. Go ahead, Walter. Man, I like this.
どうしてもナスカに出たいと思って、アメリカのナスカに出たいと思って、デビュー戦はデラウェアのドーバーだったけど、決勝レースの朝、ウォーリー・ダレンバック・ジュニアがプレゼントを持って僕のところ来てくれて。
This is for you, a present. It's kind of like a peace offering from 1996. Thank you. Good memory.
Hideo Fukuyama, Suzuka City, Japan driver, who's out here in the 66 car.
まず僕のがアメリカで、ナスカーのカップシリーズに